Black Myth Wukong is a God of War-ish, Souls-ish, Dragon Ball Z-ish action game. You manage stamina, perform light combos and heavy attacks on enemies, dodge through their attacks, and upgrade yourself through skill trees and stat allocation. The early game is pretty mashy before you get other avenues of attack like spells and spirits and different combos, so I recommend playing at least a few hours before you decide whether you like it or not. We're going to get right into the game graph, because everything I want to talk about is related to a category, so we're out here judging story, graphics, mechanics, and fun as separate entities before culminating together into a final overall score, starting with story. LOL. Black Myth Wukong is one of the most stories I've ever witnessed. You know basically nothing about your overarching goal until this super long cutscene right before the final boss, where they actually explain it to you, a cutscene that I skipped because I spent the last 35 hours watching everything else with glazed eyeballs waiting for it to make sense on its own, and figured that I just didn't deserve to be spoon-fed the details right at the end. It's like reading a whole book in a foreign language and then the final paragraph is in English and you're like, I'll just close the book. The game is split into chapters that revolve around certain characters and happenings, but it's not till the end of the chapter that they do a little video vignette thing that wordlessly explains some of their backgrounds and why things occurred. That's just in some of the chapters, though. The stories others choose to tell seem entirely irrelevant to what we just did or who we did it with, and they basically amount to condensed random fairy tales. One fairy tale I had a particular reaction to was a Rudolph-style stop-motion sketch of a hunter who saves a wounded white fox, but then has a dream where the fox turns into a naked human lady, and he has children with her, and they live happily for like 40 years until one day she randomly turns feral and kills their whole family. So he wakes up from the dream, looks at the fox, and then it cuts to him wearing the dead fox around his neck. I hate that story. Bro didn't even wait to see if the fox would turn into a Maxim 100 model IRL. He was just so spooked by a dream that he killed a wounded animal, and even if she did shapeshift, you could just do everything you did in the dream until the fateful day, and then lock her in a cage or wear her around your neck then, before she goes wild. You missed out on decades of vulpine action, just saying. I need that to happen to me, but with a low punny. Anyway, the story of Black Myth Wukong itself is basically just a series of WTF moments with overarching esoteric themes about enlightenment and Buddha stuff. You run into a little pig with a rake who becomes your best friend, and he eventually transforms into a giant pig, a giant fish, a human woman as a joke, and his eventually told origin vignette is about his star-crossed love affair with a giant spider. If you don't know the source material of Journey to the West, which is like China's Lord of the Rings in terms of cultural impact, I would not even bother trying to figure out how all these transparent loose threads tie together. I'm an American. I was just looking for shit that reminded me of Dragon Ball Z, and only found a few. I give story a 30. It basically just gets in the way of the game you're trying to play. Next up is graphics. Black Myth Wukong is a very realistically HD game in a fantasy setting, which makes for some beautiful and cool looking moments, much like God of War Ragnarok. The fight choreography and cutscenes is fantastic, the environments are super detailed. All I encountered was a bit of slowdown on occasion wandering around big open areas or for a few seconds after respawning in one, but it never affected boss fights or anything important. I give graphics a 95. Next is mechanics. Wukong's combat hits a comfortable stride after a few hours. There's 3 different stances, and I dabbled in all of them, but never found one I liked better than the original Smash stance. You build up focus with light attacks, then spend that focus on heavy attacks while interspersing spells and stuff, of which there are very few. Wukong is known as the Great Sage, but this dude can't even shoot a fireball. The spells you get are the ability to immobilize enemies for a few seconds, the ability to summon clones of yourself mimic to your style for 20 seconds or so, and a few others, none of which are ranged. There are no ranged attacks in this game at all. If there's an archer shooting at you from 10 feet above, you have no recourse but to find a way up to him, usually by finding a long way around to drop down on him from higher. It's super annoying. I'm playing as a monkey, I should at least be able to fling my shit at people and poison them or something. This is also the most pitiful and pointless implementation of a jump attack I've ever seen in a game. It literally serves no purpose, it does no damage, and you're in landing lag forever after executing it. While other games of this ilk have super strong plunging attacks you can land on dudes below you, if this Wukong wannabe leaps off a platform to strike an enemy underneath him, it's a light tap with zero efficacy. There's also no block button, replaced instead with a staff spin that can block projectiles but nothing else, so you are going to be exclusively dodging through attacks, including a perfect dodge if you time it perfectly, which initially provides you with no extra benefit, but eventually you can unlock some perks that make it more useful, like for generating extra focus or creating an after image that explodes for a little damage. So combat has its pros and cons, and for a game completely centered around combat, that means you'll be dealing with them perpetually. Wukong is a boss rush game, essentially. There's like 100 of them, and they get thrown at you in quick succession. Go down this one path, there's a boss. Turn around, go down this other path, there's a boss. Pick a mushroom, fight a boss. Talk to this NPC, fight a boss. Break this pot, fight a boss. It's the Buzz Lightyear meme of bosses everywhere. And that's fine. Better even for this game, because this boss variety is top-notch and far exceeds games like Elden Ring and the first God of War, who reuse clones all the time. Black Myth Wukong has a few clones, mostly frogs, but they command different elements and provide different experiences, and all the unique bosses are very much so. There were probably 10 bosses where I said out loud to nobody, "That's cool," or "That's super interesting." In particular, I think this game does duo fights better than any other game. They aren't just gank squads where you spend 80% of your time running away and poking. The bosses tag each other in and out in a way where you're mostly fighting one at a time until the other decides to make a move. I think all duo fights should be like this. It's great, and it's going to permanently make duo fights that don't do that feel worse retroactively. Wukong is also more forgiving than it needed to be with boss checkpoints. There are many multi-phase bosses, and sometimes if you die to a later phase, you won't have to fight the early phase again, mostly because a lot of the bosses transform into completely different stuff after certain phases, or your location changes, so then they don't make you redo stuff prior to that, which is very convenient. In regard to difficulty, I would say this game is hard, but it also provides necessary cheese to counteract that. There'll be mechanics in this game that you'll scoff at initially, like, I would never use a tool like that, that seems OP, and soon after you'll fight bosses where you're like, I think I need all these mechanics back to back. And you should, and you need to, because if you don't, the difficulty rises exponentially. The bosses are designed around the idea of you making use of these tools, like that mimic to your clone thing where you summon copies of yourself that all attack. Sounds busted at first, but later on you'll be complaining about how it's not as helpful as you need it to be. You can also get transformations where you transform into different creatures who get their own health bar and you revert when the health bar depletes, or you use a certain number of actions and you'll be like, wow, an extra health bar and basically free damage with no downside, that seems OP. Later on, I only did 10% of the boss with this transformation? Shit. There are bosses that function like Elden Ring DLC where you have to dodge like 9 hits before you get 2 seconds to counterattack, and it's a lot worse in this game because your light combos are not going to have time to go off and deal any real damage before the boss gets going again. It's not like Souls where you get your opening and your normal R1 attack or 2 still does decent damage. In Wukong, if you didn't finish your whole light combo with the finisher, you did very little damage. So you need the tools to supplement that. You don't have time for a whole light combo, but you have time to use the head bash attack from your equipped spirit to do a tremendous single hit, or you have time to quickly summon your clones or activate an accessory that spawns a stun-locking tornado. If you try to play this as a bare-bones attack and dodge situation, it's gonna be miserable. All told, I give mechanics an 80. Now for fun, is Black Myth Wukong fun? Well, some of you know that with games like this I tend to come up with a fun to frustration ratio. How often is the game fun versus how often are you banging your head against the wall or otherwise annoyed by what's happening? I would give Black Myth Wukong a 60-40 in the fun to frustration scale. The beginning is frustrating to me because of the lack of combat options, and the end is frustrating because every boss just goes berserk the whole time, but the middle leans a lot more towards fun. It's also going to be a personal thing for whether or not you like the fact that this game's areas are so big. Not big as in a huge wide open world, but big as in, oh, this path leads to 4 other paths that all lead to like 3 other paths each. It's ridiculously easy to miss large portions of the map. You'll roll credits on the chapter after 13 hours of dogged exploration and they'll say you found 2 out of 6 meditation spots. As a content creator, I prefer more linear experiences, not just because I'm on the clock in regard to finding everything to make videos on, but if there's a fork in the road with 2 paths and I go down one of them, all I'm thinking about is what's on the other path. Was the other path where I'm supposed to go, in which case I'm glad to be on this path because I do want to find everything? Or is this the path where I'm supposed to go, in which case I need to turn around so I don't miss any secrets? I have huge FOMO when it comes to branching paths, and I hate the feeling of leaving stuff behind. Even if I can just come back there later, like what if I forget where it is? Anyway, Black Myth Wukong heightens this issue because it's much bigger than the non-open world Souls games, but if you like tracking down every secret, no matter the surface area, you'll be thrilled. I give fun a 75. So now for the overall score, which is not an aggregate of previous scores because some things are weighted differently. I'm giving Black Myth Wukong an 82 out of 100. There's a lot of objectively good stuff going on, but some combat missteps and what I would call a bit of a sense of bloat permeate the experience, as well as a story that essentially doesn't matter at all, aside from being culturally different. But that's gonna do it for this review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Watch all my other videos with a power pole in your pants, and I'll see you guys next time.